Hello again. Today's topic is going to be something that no one ever talks about, but of course that's what I do, is talk about the things that are difficult to talk about. So if you like that about me, then consider donating or contributing to my Patreon page, which I'll put below. So today, why is public funding of education unconstitutional? As I detail in my books and in future videos focused on the functionality of the Constitution, the United States is not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic. And I'm glad that more and more people, are pointing that out, because these days you hear even Republicans say our democracy all the time. And that's just absolutely wrong, and it should be pointed out every single time someone says that. But what does it mean fundamentally? Well, in a democracy, laws can be created that haven't been read. The criterion that determines whether a law can be created is whether it gets a majority of the vote. In a constitutional republic, on the other hand, an evaluation has to be made about whether a proposed law meets the constitutional requirements. That means that the law has to be read, first of all, obviously, and that logic-based analysis must be conducted concerning the content of the proposed law. The preamble of the Constitution lists the purposes of law, which culminates with the phrase, "and secure the blessings of liberty." But what does that mean? Every computer programmer knows the unambiguous meaning of the word "and." That means that regardless of what comes before that phrase, it cannot negate that phrase. A and B means that both must be true. For example, if a leftist receives a communication from his boss that says the purpose of the communication is to ensure that he does two things, let's say to mop the floor and to clean the fry station, there's no conflict there. He can do both of those jobs consecutively, and one doesn't contradict the other. If the communication, on the other hand, says that he should promote the general welfare of the restaurant and secure the profits made by serving good food at reasonable prices, could that be interpreted to mean that the employee can give food away to promote people who don't want to pay for the products? Has that employee promoted the general welfare of the restaurant by bankrupting it? Leftist interpretations of the general welfare clause in the Constitution are exactly as illogical as this example. Promoting the general welfare of the country while securing the blessings of liberty come in a package deal. When you say the phrase, "the blessings of liberty," that itself is a statement of political philosophy. It means that for this nation, for the people who put this nation together, those people who embody this nation accept the philosophy that freedom is the essential component that makes life and society worth living in. Freedom is the fuel of prosperity under this philosophy. Promoting the general welfare, therefore, is to promote the philosophy of liberty. It can never mean taking by force from citizens to give unearned value to other people in any form. But for the purposes of this essay, we're going to focus on educational products and services. And if freedom is the fuel of this nation, the Constitution is the engine. When a law is proposed under this Constitution, the first test that must pass is one of purpose. And the first question is, why is this law necessary to securing the blessings of liberty? If there's not a very strong argument justifying the law on that basis, then the law can be dismissed right at the outset. If an attempt at an argument is made, and it can pass that particular test, then it has to meet the next test. Is this a law that does not respect an establishment of religion? That's a test under the First Amendment. But what does that mean? When you boil this down to mathematics and logic, it means that the law must stand to reason. And I'm going to focus on this in future videos when I focus on the Constitution. It doesn't matter how many people believe in the idea behind this law, because that's the criterion of democracy, not of a constitutional republic. The criterion of our constitutional republic is not vote count. It's mathematical adherence to the science of reason. This is what the First Amendment means. It's not what traditional conservatives have sold the farm for. The separation of church and state is the weapon with which we defeat the left. And that's what Republicans need to start understanding. Stop giving away the store to the left by weakening the meaning of this clause. So in other words, if you're a legislator and you log on to the computer program that is the Constitution, we'll say for sake of example, and you click on the button that says, "I'd like to make a law, please," the Constitution will reply, "Why is this law necessary to securing the blessings of liberty?" Well, you may be startled by that. So you'll punch in, "Oh, well, I don't know about that, but if we take a bunch of money from people and spend it how I'd like to spend it, things will be much better. You'll see." Well, what you've proposed is rejected immediately by the program because it's not phrased in a way as to ensure that its purpose is to secure the liberty of individuals. Remember, that's why you're here. That's why the Constitution is here. So you could then try to trick the system by saying something like, if we take a bunch of money from people and build stores that sell air to people in special boxes made of air, that will help secure the blessings of liberty for everyone. Well, that argument may make it past the first obstacle on form because it says this is the purpose, to secure liberty, but then the content is scrutinized under the First Amendment. Does what you're proposing make sense? And notice this is contrary to what Elena Kagan said in her confirmation hearing, which is something we'll save for later because I'm going to focus on that in a future video. Do people need to be able to purchase subsidized boxes of air contained in special boxes made of air in order to be free? First of all, air is already free, so forcing them to pay taxes to fund the building of stores so they can buy free air does not truly secure their liberty at all, reason would conclude. And the proposed law would be deemed unconstitutional because it is based on premises that are untrue, no matter how many people can be convinced to be in favor of that idea. My contention is that public funding of education fails on both points and makes it unconstitutional twice over. First of all, does it exist to secure the blessings of liberty? Well, a leftist would say that collecting taxes to fund education promotes the general welfare, and therefore it's constitutional. Even if that were true, which is proven to be false under the First Amendment, as we'll discuss shortly, it fails immediately because it also must secure the blessings of liberty to get past this preamble. Is public funding of education consistent with a philosophy that liberty produces prosperity? Obviously not. Public funding of education could not exist unless a taxpayer, generally property tax, is threatened with murder if he doesn't work for free to pay for it. Do you recognize that? Do you recognize what it is to threaten someone with murder if they don't work for free so that your ends can be paid for? It's called slavery, and that is the opposite of freedom. But leftists don't appear to be able to compute this fact, which is because they forget how to compute when it comes to arguing political points. In other situations, they don't have a problem computing. They don't have problems computing, unfortunately, when it comes to not swerving their cars into bridge abutments. They don't have problems computing how many swirls they like in the froth on their morning latte. They just don't think that reason applies to less important topics like the education system for a nation of 300 million people. But what do I mean when I say the taxpayer is threatened with murder if he doesn't work for free to pay for public funding of education? Well, those on the left who try to muster a weak argument, which most leftists don't try to argue at all because they know either cognitively or just through osmosis of some kind that their arguments are just dead on the water. But some will make an argument, and some will say something like, well, and I've read this before, well, the most that would happen to you if you don't pay your property taxes is a fine. Well, this is when I put forth the following analogy. If a woman is being raped and her attacker says that he will kill her if she doesn't stop resisting, what if she then stops resisting? Does it then at that point become consensual sex from that point forward? This analogy is perfect, except for one thing. The rapist could be bluffing, but the government isn't bluffing. The penalty for not paying your property taxes into the school system is only a fine if you consent to the rape. The real penalty is what will happen to you if you refuse to accept any penalty. And if you escalate your resistance to meet all escalations of force to collect those taxes. At the conclusion of those escalations, you will be murdered by the state. Those are just the mathematics of the situation. That is truth in the natural world. I don't pay my education taxes because I agree with public funding of education, or that I believe this is in any way constitutional. I pay them because I'm being threatened with murder by leftists if I don't. And that's what the rest of the country is doing. That's where this money is coming from. Is this securing my liberty? Obviously not. Public funding of education is the opposite of liberty for everyone involved. But let's say, for sake of argument, that it isn't necessary to be constitutional to secure liberty, which it literally is, and that all public education has to do to be constitutional is to stand on its own merits as a good thing to do. If you believe in the philosophy that freedom produces blessings, then you believe that free markets are a source of those blessings. That's what underlies the United States, free markets. I would have to assume on the front end that any such discussion, in the front end of any such discussion, that any leftist favoring public funding of education must at least agree with those of us who don't favor public funding of education in that the goal of any effort to promote an educational system in our country is to produce an environment in which the greatest quality and quantity of educational products and services to meet the needs of the greatest number and variety of citizens at the lowest cost is the result. If you don't believe that, then you're just evil on the face. If you do believe it, then what's left is just to conclude, well, which system does a better job of that? Well, the first thing one would have to note in looking at what kind of environment would achieve that most effectively is that education is as free as air in the age of the internet. Prior to the internet, at least, one could argue that poor people don't have access to information in rural areas. And even though that would certainly not constitutionally justify the creation of a compulsory top-down education system, it's at least an argument that can be made. But since the proliferation of the internet, information is universal, period. It's difficult to argue that poor people don't have access to education when they all have the latest smartphones plugged right into the internet. Consider further that a free market is an agile one. Free markets shapeshift to fit a set of conditions in ways that leaders can't predict. Better, more efficient, and cheaper ways of doing things get created by creative individuals, and you have no idea who they are, where they're coming from, what their socioeconomic status is, etc. The leftist education system is a dying meme, and it should be. This obsolete idea of gathering all of the children of a society and putting a bunch of kids in this matrix based on age and having someone sit at the front of the room or stand at the front of the room and spoon feed them information over the course of 20 years it's a dystopic nightmare. What kind of psychological effects does this subjugation of the entire population of a nation have on the human mind, especially on the developing youth? What kind of people are comfortable with this versus those who aren't? Public education is a false culture, and it's an ugly one. Instead of being individuals in a limitless world of possibility, everyone has to choose to play some stupid role in this leftist nightmare. Everything becomes an ugly stereotype. Either you're the jock, or you're the band geek, or you're the cheerleader, or some other false cultural construct, Or you're the loser, of course, who doesn't have a good attitude about all of this, about all of what you're being put through. You know, I remember being 5 or 6 years old and realizing that my life for the next decade or so would be predictably the same. I would be there in some classroom while a world of possibilities goes on outside of that room, and that I would be missing it all. It's an extremely depressing realization, and it's all for no other reason than to steal value and power from the people who create it and give it to those who don't. Among other things, like holding people back who might be those creative geniuses. People wonder where monsters like those who create Columbine and Sandy Hook come from. Wonder no longer. Monsters are created by the monsters who point guns at everyone and make them pay for leftist education programs. I don't wonder where this psychology comes from. IQ studies are clear. If someone has a high enough IQ, there's not a damn thing you can do to keep him from learning. The most effective way you can slow them down is to put them in a matrix with kids of the same age and spoon feed them information for 20 years. That does a pretty good job. Do you want to destroy the spirit and creativity of a human being? Just plug them into a socialist education camp while forcing their parents to pay for it or die. It's just sick. It's sick. You can go out on Facebook and look at your friends and look at all these postings that come up. And it's just a bunch of people. And it's posts about high school or their local sports team. It's like every single person has the same set of memories and experiences. It reminds me of the movie Blade Runner, where the replicants have implanted memories. There's no real experience there. It's all like a cartoon that's been provided to you by your overlords. And then you're supposed to be grateful for that. On the other hand, if a person has a low IQ, it doesn't matter how many high IQ kids you force around them in a classroom setting, they're not going to learn any faster. The high IQ doesn't rub off. This leftist education cabal creates a system that doesn't adapt. We're not supposed to notice that none of it is necessary. Human beings are designed to learn. What we are is we are a pile of drugs that learns. That's what a human being is. That's what we do. We don't need to teach birds how to sing, and we don't need to teach children how to learn at gunpoint. What the free market does is allow a variety of strategies to fit every parent's set of needs. Costs are kept low because of the competition among these strategies, but mainly by the fact that no parent would be forced to pick any of them. Any parent could homeschool their children according to their own set of values and ideas and beliefs. Everyone learns at his own pace, and anyone who's concerned for kids who are being left behind in a free market is free to contribute to whatever charity or organization he believes is doing the best job of combating that condition. The government's role would be shrunk to a very low-cost, minimal approach. It might be that a series of tests could be produced by the government that a parent could administer to track fundamental levels of education progress, for example, on that government scale, though most of that would still come out of the private sector. A basic curriculum of reading, writing, and math could be produced by the government at very low cost. They can pay, I'll do it for less than $1 million. And that shows you how inexpensive this would be. And the resulting product could be sold at cost to citizens, which would be about $1 plus shipping in a DVD format. There's no justifiable reason to have this $1 trillion per year travesty known as the public education system. It's a miserable failure, and not only would nothing be better, nothing would not be unconstitutional as the current system is. If the program doesn't exist to secure liberty, like the military, for example, obviously it exists to secure our liberty, to protect us from external and internal threats, such as these leftists who create these programs. If the program doesn't exist to secure liberty, then it's not constitutional, period. If it's claimed to be for that purpose, but the reality, after careful analysis, is that it does not successfully serve that purpose, it's unconstitutional, period. It's a meme that should already be dead. And it's a meme that would be dead if it weren't propped up with threats of murder. Let me give you a quick lesson in philosophy. If you have to threaten people with murder in order to pay for your idea, it's not a good one. And it's certainly not a legal one under the United States Constitution. Thanks for listening. See you next time.